Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Free Trade Agreement webcast, supporting Australian exporters through COVID-19. Greetings from Brisbane. My name is Sally Phillips, and I'm the manager of Austrade's Free Trade Agreement program, and I'm delighted to be facilitating today's event. You're going to hear some acronyms today, and FTA is certainly one of those. Over the past 5 years, the Free Trade Agreement team, or the FTA team, have had the great privilege of speaking to a considerable number of you directly, face-to-face. In fact, over 6,000 businesses have attended one of our Free Trade Agreement seminars in more than 100 locations across Australia. So despite the current circumstances and restrictions, we wanted to continue to provide information and those valuable market insights. So this today is our first in a series of 12 webcasts designed to take you on a journey, to keep you connected and informed on all things export. So I'd like to begin by saying how pleased, overwhelmed in fact, that we are to have more than 850 people register for this event, our largest and most geographically dispersed audience to date. I would also like to extend a special welcome to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are joining this webinar today, and take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we all gather today, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and their job is to outline the government support available to those who are involved in exporting. Now, while the coronavirus continues to have a significant impact on Australian businesses, and that's in addition to the many of those already impacted by the bushfires, the government has taken action to protect our economy and support business. The information presented during our webcast today is aimed at providing you with information specific to that support. Now, before I introduce our host today, I just wanted to make sure that you're all set. So a few technical housekeeping items first up. You may have noted that the boxes on your screen can be moved around, adjusted if you like. But if you get stuck and you lose the screen, just click on the icons at the bottom of your screen and these will take you back. Now, you've all automatically been placed on mute. However, if by any chance you're experiencing technical difficulties or need help, please type IT help into your chat box and one of our talented technicians will reach out to you. Now, apologies, the one thing we're not able to help you with is your internet speed and connection. So if your internet's having a bad hair day and we happen to lose you for whatever reason, please know that we are recording this event and the content will be available on Austrade's website on the FTA Free Trade Agreement page later this afternoon. I'm very excited that we have the Senator, the Honourable Simon Birmingham, the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment here to open our webcast today. Supported by the Honourable Andrew G, Minister, assisting the Minister for Trade and Investment and the Minister for Decentralisation and Regional Education. Now, prior to entering the Senate for South Australia in 2007, Simon worked for a number of industry bodies, establishing significant industry in the wine, tourism and hospitality sectors, industries critical to Australia's future. Now, Simon will be joining us from his offices in Adelaide this morning. So do we have you on the line, Minister? Welcome,
hello,
Simon.
Sally. Thanks very much. Well, thank you, Sally. It's a delight to be with everybody this morning, and I do want to warmly thank everyone for taking the time out of your business days and your other tasks to engage in this webcast. COVID-19 has impacted on our lives and the livelihoods of so many Australians and, of course, people right around the world. But as restrictions are eased, as we get local businesses back to work, as we get exporters hopefully back into production, this is a time to really look to the future. And we've certainly seen remarkable changes over recent years in the expansion of export opportunities, but now over recent months in the disruption of some of them. But no doubt out of that disruption will come new opportunities, and they're the things that we all need to work together on to seize. And this webcast today is the first in a 12-part series to be delivered over the next few months to help businesses to plan as part of the bounce back of our economy. It includes and will include information covering the range of different assistance that's available to your businesses, latest insights from our key export markets, particularly those covered by our free trade agreements. And importantly for exporters, and we'll outline how best to access some of the benefits offered by those free trade agreements. Despite COVID-19, we've had a remarkable start once again to this year. The latest ABS trade data showed very much that Australian trade and exports were continuing at strong levels, Australia recording our 27th consecutive monthly trade surplus, routinely now exporting more than we import as a nation. The last month standing at some $10.6 billion in total. And our global trade and investment relationships really are demonstrating the benefits that are yielding, not just in total dollar terms to the country, but importantly, business by business, as we've seen growth, not just in our total trade volumes over recent years, but crucially in the number of businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, exporting around the world. Many of those businesses at present, many of you perhaps, are currently working through the government's JobKeeper programs and our other support measures to keep people afloat. Because we know that whilst those aggregate trade volumes and numbers have held up, for many, the disruptions to logistics and supply chains, the interruptions to customer operations in other parts of the world have certainly meant an immediate downturn has been felt. But we can also see that other parts of the world have reopened, are reopening, and that over time we will get those logistical barriers addressed. And in the interim, we're working as hard as we can as a government to keep those logistics and those freight routes open for you. Our international freight adjustment mechanism, which you'll hear a little bit more about today, has been an investment by our government to make sure that you can still honour your export contracts, that you can still get goods to market where you seek to do so. And that's going to be ever so crucial to demonstrate the reliability of Australia during these tough times, that even when airlines aren't flying, we find a way to back our exporters to get goods to market. Elsewhere, I know, especially in the services sectors, especially those international education or tourism providers, you will be acutely aware and concerned of where things are at in terms of the return of international travellers. And that's going to take a little while to come. We're going to work with you in terms of how we stimulate the domestic market. We're going to work carefully with the universities and with the private education providers as to how we step through getting students back into our universities, back into those education providers, and rebuild those services sectors as well. I know that for many of you, the geopolitical debates of the time will also have been factoring on your minds. The debates involving China and the debates involving trade tensions elsewhere, the escalation of discussions around protectionist sentiments elsewhere around the world. And I want to reassure you that we are working as hard as we can to try to make sure that we keep those trade lines open right around the world. Yes, we're disappointed with decisions such as China's in relation to our barley industry and our meat processors. But these technical barriers to trade, these technical issues and regulatory interruptions are things that we've all dealt with over the years. We'll deal with them again. We'll deal with them calmly, professionally, and work through those. They're a reminder as well that each and every exporting business needs to be mindful that when they go into those international markets, they must make sure that their practices are in accordance with the laws of those markets and with the undertakings given around customs, quarantine, other matters. More broadly, we are working with other countries to make sure that the benefits of opening up trade that have been delivered to the world over the last few decades aren't lost by a sudden lurch to more protectionist instincts. That's crucial, and our free trade agreements that Australia has in place across many, many markets around the world now, which we've grown from covering just 20-odd% of Australian exports when we were first elected to covering now close to 70% today, are a crucial buffer to make sure that Australia's exporters remain as protected as possible in these times. And we seek to grow that further through our negotiations with the European Union, with the UK, elsewhere around the world, but not just through FTAs, also through the drive of our India economic strategy, and the focus of Austrade's promotional work and the support that they can give to your businesses, not just through seminars like this, but through further more detailed market intelligence and direct assistance in market. It's why we're going to continue to grow that free trade agenda, to create more FTA opportunities, and to make sure that opportunities like today are there for you to learn how to take advantage of it. Because each time one of you go out there and successfully grow our export base, that is going to be helping with our economic recovery from COVID. It's going to be helping to deliver the jobs and the revenue and the growth that Australia will need to ensure we have such a strong recovery in the future. So thank you once again for all that you do as entrepreneurs, as innovators, and as risk takers in getting out there. Services like this are hopefully about allowing you to minimise that risk and maximise the opportunities that are there. Many of you I know are scattered across regional Australia too, which is such an important base for our exporters, and that's why I'm thrilled to have the Assistant Minister for Trade, Andrew G, with us today, who has such strong knowledge and expertise across rural and regional Australia and helps to make sure that as we roll out these programs, our focus is on ensuring they're a benefit to the entire country and all of the opportunities you seek to seize. Thanks once again, good luck, and I hope you find this session and those that are to come highly informative.
Good morning, Andrew, and we're ready for you. I'd like to introduce that we now have joining us is the Honourable Andrew G, Minister, assisting the Minister for Trade and Investment and the Minister for Decentralisation and Regional Education. Over to you, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much, Sally, and also to Simon. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar today as part of this very important series that Austrade and DFAT are putting together. As Simon just pointed out, the effects of COVID-19 have been devastating right throughout our communities, but they've also hit regional communities very hard. And I think that despite the hits that we've taken, trade and also regional Australia and country Australia are very well placed to help lead us out of this recovery. In fact, they're going to be vital to getting us out of the situation that we're currently in. And if you look back to, well, when I first came into federal politics, it was about 2016. Australia was going through a bit of an economic, I won't say slump, but things were slowing down a little bit, and it was agriculture that really led the way through that difficult time. And I think the good news is that we've had some rain in a lot of country areas, not as much as we need, but it's all heading in the right direction. And so I think that the signs there are good, that regional and country Australia can make a real contribution to this recovery process. And a big part of that is our free trade agreements. And if you look at the way that this drought has panned out, the work that we've done over the years on securing these free trade agreements has been absolutely vital, because even though this drought has sent a wrecking ball through the regions, one thing that is different is that stock prices have held up, and farmers haven't had to, for the most part, sell their sheep and cattle for a song. There's been a market there. Rural real estate prices have actually held up pretty well as well. And that is off the back of all of the hard work that's been done on these free trade agreements over the years. And that's how important they are. As Simon said, we are a trading nation, and we need to maintain our commitment to the free and open international rules-based trading system. It's never been so important, as we've seen in more recent times as well. So I think that even though that we have some very big challenges ahead of us, we can get through them, and trade is going to be oh so very important. And that's where the participation of your organisations and your firms are really vital as well, because, as Simon said, anything that you can do not only helps your business and your local community, but collectively we also help Australia through this very difficult time. I think our fundamentals in this country are still very good, and we are still very well placed to emerge from this this pandemic in better shape than many other countries. We really are. But there's going to have to be a lot of work in terms of rebuilding our supply chains, getting some of those key businesses up and running. And as the Minister for Regional Education, obviously, I'm very keen to see students, international students, coming back into our universities, because they've all taken a big hit from all of this. So whilst we've got some big challenges ahead of us, I think there is a lot of opportunity there for Australia and Australian firms. So I welcome your participation in this webinar today, and I thank you for it. And I also wanted to thank Austrade and DFAT for driving this series and putting it all together. It's an important part of our recovery process, and I hope that you all find some benefit from it, and that it can help you maximise your opportunities, both in Australia, but also taking those opportunities to the world. So thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to hearing the feedback from the discussions today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's fantastic to have both ministers join us from their offices in Adelaide and in Orange in New South Wales. Isn't technology wonderful when it works? Well, today's lineup, shortly we'll be hearing from our experts, and then we'll conclude with a panel Q&A. But firstly, 3 quick points. You will be able to post questions in the chat box, and we will answer as many of those questions as possible during our panel Q&A session. We have already received a significant number of questions submitted at registration. So thanks to all of you who have put your questions forward. And I can also see that we've got a large volume coming in as I speak. So given this, what we'll try to do is group the questions into common themes so that we can cover off as many as possible in the time we have today. Secondly, there is a very short survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. Now, I know you're probably thinking short. Yeah, right, I've heard that before, but I promise it is just 3 short questions. And it's important. Well, why? Well, because your feedback is going to help shape the future of these, the content, and what we're going to talk about in the forthcoming webinars. So please do take a moment. One more, yes, social media. We would love you to share this webinar series with your networks. The hashtag for today's event is #FTA seminars. So whether you're madly tweeting, Instagramming, LinkedIning, Facebooking, WhatsApping, it'd be fantastic if you could help more people access that information. And a big shout out to those of you already had. I could see there was a lot going on LinkedIn last night. So thanks a lot. So let's move on and welcome our 4 experts joining us today to focus on key initiatives and support for Australian exporters. Our first speaker today is Michael Byrne, Freight Coordinator General, International Freight Assistance Mechanism, also known as IFAM. Now, you may well be asking, what is the International Freight Assistance Mechanism? What is IFAM? Well, it's the government's response to the collapse of the international air freight capacity as a result of COVID-19. But I'll leave that for Michael to explain. It's wonderful to have Michael here with us today. He is in high demand. He's going to be dialing in from Sydney, but by way of a little bit of background, Michael has an incredibly distinguished career. It's such a long list that I won't read it all out, but including most recently as the Managing Director of Toll Group. So, Michael, do we have you on the line? Handing over to you. Thank you.
Sally, good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for that. And I hope everyone's great. So IFAM, we're in week 7 of IFAM, and we have about 60 people from Austrade, Department of Agriculture, Defence, Department of Infrastructure, Transportation, Health in a group, chaired by myself and another lady who's a 2-star Air Vice Commodore Marg Stade. And we are looking at 2 things: re-establishing air freight out of Australia to our core markets to defend them and help exporters get back into the game, and then to bring health and things of national significance back into the country. And we have a team of people who are analysing data each day, and then we make decisions on what we need to do and how we're going to do that. So far, the latest report as of Sunday, and we've just started week 7, we've spent about $53 million on support. We've moved around 25,614 tonnes of air freight, or committed to doing that, of predominantly primary produce. And we've committed to or flown or put product on flights to a number of about 800 flights out of this country from 7 cities to 28 destinations. Considering that 91% of Australia's air freight had collapsed when Qantas finished 6 weeks ago, to be able to redo that in 6 weeks, I commend all the departments and whole of government for being able to do that. We've now, 6 weeks ago, we had no air flights out of Perth, Adelaide, Tasmania, and only a few out of Brisbane, none out of far North Queensland. In that time, we've now been able to get international flights that are supported by the federal government back into every capital city of Australia, and in a consistent cycle of at least 6 weeks. And we've also been able to put airline flights back into far North Queensland. We're doing that through a combination of either repat flights with the Department of Infrastructure, charters where we've got Qantas and Singapore Airlines running dedicated services for us, or Virgin now started this week with mail flights to the US and medical flights back out of the US. We're running our own charters from Brisbane to Singapore, Melbourne to Singapore, Adelaide to Singapore, Melbourne to Hong Kong, Brisbane to Hong Kong, Brisbane to Hong Kong, Cairns, or Brisbane to Cairns, Hong Kong, Brisbane to LAX, and then Sydney Narita. So they're dedicated charters that we have in our cycle. And then we are also doing grants, one-way charters from full loads at 44 tonne down to 5 tonne blocks. Then we're also doing blocks where we've bought blocks on different planes, particularly Middle Eastern planes, to keep them open back into the Middle East and Europe. And in some cases, we're also doing small volumes. But the intellectual logic is about getting more tonnes to fly so more planes come back into the air. Now, what we've got to encourage is to get away from that 91% collapse. And as of a week ago, we're down at 68% of Australia's air freight doesn't exist. So we have been able to move it 23 points. And it's about getting more flights back into the air and encouraging airlines to go back, also supporting them to go back, but then giving primary producers particularly certainty on what they can fish, harvest or slaughter to get that back onto a plane. But we need to give them certainty and continuity. When we started this program, prices were between 3 times at the lowest point of X being the last 12-month average of pre-COVID, to 13.8 times X. We've been able to get that down to between 40% of on top of X in the lowest sector being Melbourne to about 8 times X. So prices have come down significantly, particularly to Hong Kong, China, parts of China, and to Singapore. We need to do a lot more work on particularly Europe and North America. I'm deeply appreciative of everyone's great support and how the government's working together. This is my first time 7 weeks in being in government. I've been in private businesses all my life. My mother owned a trucking company and I grew up half my life around Dubbo and Gallargambone, so I know the country very well. But I'm very impressed and very appreciative of the level of support that all the government departments have been able to stand this up so quickly and be able to give our primary producers opportunity to get going again. And I'll stop there, Sally, but stay on the call for questions at the end.
Fantastic, Michael. That's really insightful. It's an amazing job that you've been doing, so congratulations. I can see we've got a lot of questions coming in, but I might hold those over to the end. But the 3 key points are products, ports and destinations. So we'll come back to you shortly. Our next speaker joining us today is Angus McKenzie. Angus heads up the competitiveness and business engagement branch of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And his most recent roles in DFAT have involved coordinating the department's bushfire response and most recently the COVID-19 scenario planning. Now, Angus is going to hand straight to our second speaker, and that's Dom Bilby. Dom is the Assistant General Manager, Client Programs Austrade, and delivers a range of client programs, including the Export Market Development Grants, EMDG, as it's commonly known, and he's going to talk to you about that program today. Dom will then hand to Andrew Perkins. Andrew is the Director of Business Development, South Australia and the NT for Export Finance Australia. Andrew is going to be calling in from Adelaide today. His responsibilities for providing finance to companies who are either exporting directly, involved in export supply chains, or looking to invest offshore. So first up is Angus. Angus, do we have you on the line? Angus is dialing in from Canberra this morning. Good morning, Angus.
Good morning, Sally, and thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you too to everyone for joining us in this webinar. Look, along with Austrade, Export Finance Australia, and a range of other Commonwealth departments and agencies, DFAT's been very actively involved in helping Australians and Australian businesses throughout the COVID-19 crisis. For example, we've assisted over 20,000 Australians to return home, including on 170 non-scheduled flights, and handled over 70,000 COVID-19 related calls on our consular hotline. We've been active in working with other agencies in securing vital supplies of medical and PPE equipment for the health system. But in the couple of minutes I have this morning, and in the first of this series of webinars on exporting, what I'd like to highlight is, and at a high level, some of the ways in which DFAT is helping business through the COVID-19 crisis and in their preparations for recovery. I look forward to dealing with any specific questions in the course of the panel discussion afterwards. Next slide, please. First, drawing on Australia's diplomatic network of embassies and high commissions, DFAT, as Minister Birmingham underlined, have been working hard bilaterally, regionally and multilaterally with other countries to get their support for resisting the adoption of trade-related COVID-19 protectionist measures, and we're doing that through the G20, the WTO, APEC and other multilateral channels as well as bilaterally. We've been working hard with business to identify any unjustified non-tariff barriers in other countries, and that's something that we've been doing for a long time and continuing through this period. And Australian exporters can report their concerns regarding these via the website tradebarriers.dfat.gov.au, and I'd encourage you to do that. Secondly, along with Austrade, DFAT's been working with other governments, so with overseas businesses and with other Australian businesses to overcome international supply chain constraints and restrictions. And this includes overcoming issues in the medical supplies area, which are critical to combating COVID-19, and for agricultural products. And as part of these efforts, we've temporarily suspended customs duties on certain imported medical and hygiene products required to manage the crisis. This will be a short-term measure in place for a period of 6 months, retrospectively from the 1st of February. Next slide, please. Thirdly, along with Austrade, DFAT maintains very regular contact throughout this crisis with a range of Australian peak industry bodies, such as the Business Council of Australia and the Australian Industry Group. And we continue to work closely with state and territory governments to make sure that our respective activities are coordinated to support business. And in the course of this contact, we've been sharing our up-to-date COVID-related market information and, importantly, getting a better understanding of the trade-related COVID-19 issues being experienced by business. And this has been critical in developing the government support initiatives that you're hearing about this morning, such as IFAM and the EMDG. This sort of regular contact will continue and is an important part of our response. And finally, on that point, DFAT also has a dedicated group of people that are supporting businesses with COVID-19 issues, and businesses, including businesses participating today can contact this group with specific questions by using the email address on the screen, business@dfat.gov.au. Next slide, please. And finally, DFAT's work on expanding and diversifying trade opportunities for Australian businesses, and this is via the government's active trade agreement agenda. All that work is ongoing, and both ministers highlighted some of this. And if I can just point to a couple of key points that are worth remembering. There have been further annual tariff cuts for our exporters under existing free trade agreements with China, Japan, Thailand, and Korea in recent times, as well as under the two regional agreements, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and the ASEAN Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. We have had two new bilateral free trade agreements enter into force earlier this year, one with Peru and one with Hong Kong. And our free trade agreement with Indonesia will enter into force on the 5th of July. Elsewhere, we're maintaining the momentum in free trade agreement negotiations with the EU, and we will commence free trade agreement negotiations with the UK just as soon as they are ready to do so. And all of this work will provide important further opportunities for Australian businesses as we and they emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. And for more detailed information on all of this work, can I recommend DFAT's free trade agreement web pages, fta.gov.au, and in particular the FTA portal, which is at ftaportal.dfat.gov.au. Both those addresses are on the screen. The FTA portal is a user-friendly and free website that provides detailed information about exporting and importing goods and services using Australia's FTAs, which are an important tool for exporters. And I encourage you all to look at those website. Now that just about concludes the time I have now, and I'll hand over to Dom Bilby from Austrade to talk about the EMDG, and look forward, as I say, to responding to some specific questions in our panel shortly. So over to you, Dom.
Thank you very much, Angus. Much appreciated. Hi, everyone. The Minister referred to you all as innovators, entrepreneurs, and risk takers, and EMDG is particularly relevant to the risk-taking aspect. EMDG is a reimbursement program which seeks to support your promotional activities in foreign markets, and it does this by reimbursing up to 50% of your promotional expenses in foreign markets. So we'll go through some of the details. If we can just have the next slide, please, Antonio. As I said, EMDG is a financial assistance program. It's designed for SMEs, so those with entities with a turnover of up to $50 million. It has received some extra funding over recent times. In the 1920 budget, the government increased funding by $60 million over 3 years, taking funding to $157 million. And as part of the COVID response package this year, increased funding to $207 million. This year, we've reimbursed almost 4,000 applicants, nearly $200 million in promotional expenses. Many of our applicants are smaller businesses. In fact, 80% have an annual income of $5 million or less. Last year, our 4,000 or so applicants reported about $4 billion in exports. You can go to the next slide, please, Antonio. So there's a maximum of 8 grants. You are able to combine 2 years of two financial years worth of promotional spend in your first year's application. You do need to have incurred $15,000 worth of promotional expenses. There is a maximum grant of $150,000. Now, with the maximum number of 8 grants, it isn't necessary for you to apply for an EMDG grant in each successive year. You may choose to optimise your support under the program by applying for reimbursement in years where you've had particularly large promotional spends. So who can apply? As I said, it's designed for SMEs. who are promoting a whole range of goods and services. About 70% of our applicants are in the services space, but we also support many manufacturers and primary goods producers. You can see there from the slides, which will be available on the website, so no need to take screenshots or extensive notes. They'll be on the website in which you registered for the event. So you can see there that there's a significant range of products that are supported. It's also relevant to say that promotional activities in almost all markets of the world are supported. In fact, there's only two that aren't supported. It's North Korea and New Zealand, but not for the same reasons. That's the only AMDG gag that I have. Applications open on the 1st of July. Now, bearing in mind that's for expenses being reimbursed of the previous financial year. They do close at the end of November. We encourage people to apply early, so we're able to apply our assessment resources and assess your eligibility and get the money out to you early. If, however, you're running a little late, you are able to access an AMDG consultant who's been approved to lodge until the end of February for an AMDG application. So the eligible expense categories, I note that we'll come to some questions later, and there have been some questions about online promotions given the restrictions around travel. AMDG's long supported digital promotional activities, including website builds and using conventional promotional activities via Google, Amazon, etc. You can see at the top of the list on that slide the eligible expense categories. Overseas representation has been a real key marker of success for our exporters over time. Around half of our applicants seek reimbursement for overseas representation expenses. Marketing consultants, including Austrade services, are reimbursable under the AMDG program. Marketing visits, not so relevant right now, but things will bounce back. Free samples, if you're in the goods space, are reimbursable up to $15,000. Attendance at trade fairs, seminars and in-store promotions, again, not so relevant now, but will come back online. Promotional literature and advertising does include all digital forms of marketing and is a key expense category. Bringing overseas buyers to Australia is also reimbursable. And finally, the registration and insurance of eligible intellectual property up to $50,000 is also reimbursable. Finally, last slide, we've got some links there. As I said, the slides will be available on the web, and you can click on some of those links and it will take you through to some more detailed information about the program, including some coaching videos as to how to make an application for AMDG. We do have, finally, our advice line, 132878. There are dedicated AMDG staff available on that number, and they're the people who are actually assessing applications. So it's an extremely good service. You won't get better advice about AMDG anywhere. It's also a free service as well. So thank you for your time. I'm handing over now to Andrew Perkins from Export Finance Australia. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Andrew Perkins. Great to see so many people on the call this morning. So Export Finance Australia is the government's official export credit agency. We operate similar to a bank and provide loans, guarantees and bonds to companies that are exporting, in export supply chains or investing offshore. Importantly, we don't compete with the banks, but rather work with them to support the growth of Australian businesses. We work with a wide range of businesses, including small businesses right through to medium-sized companies and large corporates. One thing they all have in common, though, is that they have a certain capability that makes their product or service globally competitive. It's important to point out that we don't just support the export of products, but also the export of services and intellectual property, and this includes inbound international tourism. Now, with the impact of COVID-19, the landscape for a lot of exporters has changed significantly. As a result of this, the government announced an extension to our offering with the COVID-19 Export Capital Facility. Through this facility, Export Finance Australia is able to provide loans to exporters that were successful prior to COVID-19, but have been impacted due to the current situation. A loan could be provided for general working capital or even for capital expenditure. Just to give you a bit of an understanding of some of the discussions that we're having with exporters at the moment and the type of funding we're looking to provide, it essentially comes down to three separate areas. The first one being a supply side issue. So a business may have been impacted in terms of delivery of key supplies, key inputs, or those suppliers, that market might be more competitive and essentially increasing their cost base. So we're looking at a number of facilities where we're looking to provide a loan to increase to cover the increased costs that business is experiencing. The second is a demand side issue. So where export orders may have been delayed or deferred or cancelled in its entirety. Thankfully, a lot of these discussions are revolving delays in shipments and funding, and those orders expect to come on at another time. And we're looking to provide general working capital to a lot of these businesses as cover whilst they wait for these markets to rebound. The third type of funding that we're looking to provide is really a shift in business strategy or look at new opportunities for a business. This might be a business taking on new markets or investing in e-commerce infrastructure and marketing. We're looking at the moment to provide a loan to a consumer product exporter that is looking to do just that. Their wholesale market has essentially shut down. So they're looking to shift their business strategy to an e-commerce play, and we're looking to fund not only the e-commerce infrastructure development and marketing, but also the inventory build-up that goes along with that. Now, across all these conversations that we are having with exporters, each business is being impacted in different ways, and they have different needs. So the important message from me today is really to reach out to us and have a conversation about how we may be able to help your business. We have teams across Australia, and we're very happy to have a conversation about how we might be able to help you. Pleasingly, it's not just about COVID impacted businesses. We are seeing a lot of inquiry and activity for exporters that are looking at new opportunities across all different parts of the world. So that side of our business still continues to see a lot of activity. So I encourage all exporters on the call today to make contact with us. Please either Google Export Finance Australia or visit our website, www.exportfinance.gov.au. And through our website, we can set up a call with one of our team across Australia. Thanks, Sally. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Well, we have got questions coming in thick and fast, and I guess no surprises, but top of the pops, we're receiving an overwhelming number of questions on China. Now, noting the Minister's comments today, and obviously there's been a lot of statements made in media interviews recently, but I think I'm going to pass the baton to Angus from DFAT to make some general comments about China.
Look, thank you, Sally. And yes, we have received clearly a lot of questions about China and a lot of interest in that. The Minister made it clear at the beginning of the webinar that the China relationship is one which is very important for Australia. Indeed, it's never been more important nor more complex. The complementarities between our two economies, despite any difficulties that may grab the media headlines, the complementarities between our two economies remain very strong. And ministers and the Prime Minister have made it repeatedly clear that our comprehensive strategic partnership with China is a top priority. However, at the same time, we have to recognise we're two very different countries, and there will be points of difference between us at times. Those points of difference, however, shouldn't prevent us from proceeding in those areas where we can cooperate and where it is in our mutual interest. And to that end, the government is committed to the careful management of the relationship to achieve a workable and respectful partnership in which we can advance both Australia's security and economic interests. Look, we have a range of complex issues in our trading relations with China at the moment, but we would be very disappointed if China treated those trade issues on any other basis than their actual merits. These are separate issues, separate technical issues, and in good faith, we will continue to treat them in that way. We make the point that any measures taken by China against Australia's economic interests for political reasons will be contrary to agreements under the WTO and under our China-Australia Free Trade Agreement obligations and commitments. We've seen issues over barley, of course, which has effectively stopped an extremely valuable export for Australia. The fact is that Australian producers have been able to export barley at market-leading prices to China because they are the most efficient and competitive in the world, and that has nothing to do with the government support or market distorting practices. That's a point we will continue to make to China. We're working closely with industry to assess all the options that we have and to resolve this issue, and we will reserve our right to defend the interests of Australian barley producers, just as we will for other Australian producers and exporters. There's some questions here about coal. We're aware of media reports indicating China is expected to tighten coal imports in the second half of 2020 to protect its domestic industry, and we're seeking urgent clarification of how those restrictions will come into play, and we're working closely with industry, and similarly in the area of temporary suspensions for Australian meat establishments. We can assure all businesses and exporters that the Australian government and all agencies of the Australian government will continue to work extremely hard to defend Australia's interest and the interests of Australian exporters in this regard. But my final point on all this is that this is a relationship which is important for both Australia and China, and it's in our interests, our collective interests, to resolve these issues as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Angus. Yes, it's a broad. I think we could have a whole webinar just on China. But I'm going to move around. We've had a lot of questions come in. I've got one for Dom regarding EMDG. Just reading it here. With the current restrictions changing the way businesses operate, are businesses able to claim for digital marketing or setting up systems to support online sales?
Yes, Sally, thanks for the question. Yes, the program does support website builds, advertising buyers, Google AdWords, those sorts of things. The program's always supported that, but we expect there'll be a very significant uptake in these aspects of digital marketing.
What about costs for trademarks, Dom?
Yep, so the registration of IP, including designs, is a reimbursable expense up to $50,000.
Fantastic. Andrew, in a similar vein, travel restrictions changing the way businesses operate, can a business get a loan to set up systems to support online sales? Could you perhaps explain that a little, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess with the business increasing focus around e-commerce, the key thing from a lender's perspective is to understand what those project costs will be, not just in terms of the development of the infrastructure, but also the marketing. And then thirdly, the working capital piece that goes along with a lot of direct-to-consumer business models. Inventory or stock needs to be built up so that when a customer goes online and clicks buy, they're able to ship that straight away. It's not made to order, it's made essentially speculatively. So that working capital piece around building up stock is also an consideration. But Export Finance Australia, happy to have a conversation around an exporter looking to increase their e-commerce presence and fund a big portion of that project.
So Andrew, I can imagine, we're getting quite a few questions, but I can imagine that you're speaking to businesses all the time, being the man with the money. What sort of advice are you giving exporters who have been impacted by COVID-19 and are looking to bounce back? Have you got a couple of tips that you could share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. For for me, one of the key things at the moment, it's core to every conversation we're having, is liquidity. It's a bit of a cliche, but the old saying, cash is king. So the conversation we're having with every exporter at the moment is really to understand what your cash position is today, understand or forecast what it might be next month, in 6 months' time, and in 12 months' time, and run different scenarios, both in terms of a revenue line. Is there risk to export receipts being delayed or deferred? And are there ways that you can massage some of those costs, some of that cost base as well? Have some really honest and open conversations with your customers and your suppliers. And it's also a good time to review your balance sheet. Are there assets on your balance sheet where you might be able to free up cash? On the other side of that as well, is now a good time or an opportunity to invest in new assets that can increase the efficiency or the future of the business and really hit the rebound running. So with that as well, it's really important to make sure that your network are well understood about where you want to go. So make sure that you're talking openly and honestly to your bank. Make sure your accountant is heavily involved in your business. At the end of the day, cash is king and will really support your business in the rebound phase.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, Michael, we have quite a few questions, a lot actually, around IFAM. So off the top, are there plans to expand IFAM to other ports, i.e. Perth, destinations, Latin America, other goods beyond agri and food? What about seasonal exporters? A couple of other quick ones while I'm going. When will IFAM end? And how do we contact for freight to get air freight costs? Who do businesses go to?
So thanks. I don't think that was one question, Sally. But anyway, let's have a quick attempt at that. So 3,908. So 3,908 tonnes have already been committed or moved out of Perth. So Perth is the fourth largest market that we've already been committed to, whether it is lamb to the Middle East, whether it is lobsters to China, whether it is mixed flights to China, whether it is Singapore flights for pork and mixed vegetables, the 6 freight forwarders, and particularly I think in that part of the woods, Tigers. Jason, they are moving flights every day out of Perth. There are flights every week out of every capital city that are supported by IFAM. So Perth is a key destination as the fourth largest, and 3,908 tonnes as of Sunday have committed out of there. Latin America, not at this point. There's not an air bridge to that at this point, apart through North America, and it's just too expensive at this point. So, and it's not in the next cycle of thinking. IFAM Phase 1 is, we're deep into that, week 7. The first $110 million will run out probably in the second week of July. We are currently, with the Department of Infrastructure, putting forward a Phase 2 of IFAM to Minister Birmingham and the Deputy Prime Minister for them to consider and take to Cabinet in June. We see Phase 1 finishing in July, then Phase 2 till Christmas, subject to what Cabinet think, and then a Phase 3, and then a long-term Phase 4, which is policy review. Hopefully that was 3 or 4 of your questions in there, Sally, quickly, but I'm happy to do more quickly.
Thank you, Michael. Conscious of time, we do have a few more questions that are coming in. One very specific call to action. How do I make a viable request for space on existing flights? I mean, what should businesses be doing? Who do they go to find out whether they're eligible?
Well, you can get onto the Austrade website, and there is a whole section in there about IFAM and all the flights that is updated a couple of times a week that you can look at and see where those flights are flying to. Then there is a template to help fill out. There are 6 picked global forwarders, or your own forwarder can write to us for consideration in blocks. Have to remember here, to get planes going, it is no use trying to do it in 100 Ks, 100 kilo blocks. It just doesn't move the needle with a plane. So we've got to try to consolidate, aggregate, work together, get more people to work together to get things into tons. Otherwise, planes don't take off and they don't leave their original destination to come here.
Sounds like you've got another call in, Michael. So I'm going to come back to you.
That's not me.
It's not you. Okay. Well, I'll come back to you in a moment, but I have one last question. So while you're thinking about this, if you were a betting man, Michael, when would you say, what are the forecasts for international travel for flights? When are they likely to return? So I'll let you ponder that. I've got a question for Angus because I can't ignore we're receiving a huge number of questions here. India's trending. What is the status around the bilateral and RCEP negotiations? The audience is keen to hear more about India. So Angus, over to you. I've also got another question here is, what are the next countries, the top priorities for Australia to enter into negotiations of FTAs?
Okay, thanks, Sally. Look, the main focus with negotiations with India in recent times have been around RCEP, and India has been part of those negotiations from the start in 2012. They agreed to the text that was finalised at the Leaders Summit in November 2019, but the country has publicly said that it's not ready yet to fully join RCEP. In particular, they've expressed concerns around possible surges in imports that would flow from the tariff reductions that RCEP provides for. However, we haven't given up on that. Australia wants to keep the door open for India on RCEP, including by working with India to address those issues that are still outstanding for it. On the bilateral front, we're committed to building our economic relationship with India, including through the India Economic Strategy, which is looking to improve opportunities for Australian business to engage economically with India. And as I say, we're certainly open to working with India to see how we can work with other partners in RCEP to facilitate India's participation in RCEP should it change its mind and decide to join in the future. And finally, on the last question, what priorities do we have? Well, I mentioned two of them in my earlier presentation. That is the Australia-EU free trade agreement, negotiations for which are well advanced and are ongoing. And of course, the UK FTA, which political leaders from both sides have said publicly they're both committed to negotiating as soon as possible. And of course, we stand ready to begin those negotiations with the UK just as soon as they are able to.
Thanks, Angus. Mindful of time, Dom, I'm going to hand to you and then to Michael. Dom, do you have one last comment for new exporters or a 20-second final suggestion or tip or any advice?
Yep. Plan your marketing, have a good read of the EMDG material, talk to our people, understand the program so you can leverage it and do more marketing than you otherwise would have. Thanks, Sally.
Fantastic. Michael, my last question.
So there's an IATA report that was published last week, which is the International Air Traffic Association of all airlines, that said that they don't believe normalised air traffic will come back till 2023. Now,
wow.
I'm not that pessimistic. I'm more optimistic, but I don't see air freight, and that's a published report, anyone can print it off. I don't see air freight coming back till the next northern summer.
Okay, well, that gives us a lot to think about. Well, thank you, panel. That was really dynamic. We're just getting so many questions. So I'd really like to thank our guest speakers for their presentation. Big virtual round of applause. But I'd also like to thank all of you for attending, for making this a record event for us today. Crikey, I think the NBN will be relieved when we all hang up in just a moment's time. Thank you too for your questions. As I've mentioned, we had far many more than we could answer. Seeing all those questions coming into my inbox, I now know what the term trying to drink from a fire hose really means. We've had questions about education. We've had questions about R&D grants, which really do relate to Oz industry. We've had questions that are directed to the Minister. I just want to reassure you that we will take all of those questions on board and into consideration for designing the future content. We'll be running another 11 webinars, fortnightly in this series. The registration will be coming to an inbox near you very soon. If you'd like to share it with businesses, with colleagues, with friends, please just flick them the link. Send it on as much as you can. We've sent out to many thousands of businesses today and we've had a great turnout, but we're hoping that we can spread this news. So as we move forward with these webinars, our key objective is to provide you with the insights and the information that you need to prepare for the bounce back. So on that note, if you do have suggestions, a burning desire to hear more on a specific topic, then please include those in the comments in your survey, which is coming to you immediately as we hang up. So this feedback will really be important because it'll help us design what we're going to focus on next. So we haven't forgotten education, and we're certainly going to cover that off in one of our next webinars. So from all of us, from Sydney, from Adelaide, from Orange, from Canberra, from here in Brisbane, thank you so much for joining us. It's been my absolute pleasure to facilitate today's session. I look forward to seeing you all again, albeit virtually, at our next webinar where we will navigate the export journey. So on that note, it's goodbye from me. Arigatou gozaimasu, terima kasih, arrivederci. See you next time. Thank you.